Distance learning. Let's talk about distance learning. Distance learning has been something that is new for all of us, parents, teachers, staff, everyone in here. And so it has been something that we've all had to adjust to. And so I can say that I have been adjusting, I've continued to adjust, and I have mastered trial and error. I have not mastered distance learning, but I have mastered trial and error. Okay. I can try some things out, and if it doesn't work, I can throw it away. And if it does, I will continue to use it and recycle in this space. Okay. So let's start with one thing that I've noticed with distance learning. When we are in person, the students and the parents interact, as well as the students and the teacher. But when we were in person learning, I interacted with my students most of the time. I saw my parents at report card conferences. You know, we checked in, I talked, I made calls. But through this distance learning, I am in a relationship with the students and the parents. It is, I like to call it, I've been calling it the triangle. We have the students at the center, and we have the parents and the teacher at both ends. And parents, what I can tell you is we have to work together in this space. We are the dream team. Okay, we can no longer think that there's a space for the teacher and the student, and there's a space for the parent and the student. We are in one space. We are one triangle. We are in this together, because it does not work if one piece is missing from the triangle. Okay. And so, I did make that up, but I may need to patent that. Okay. But it does not work. And so I have learned, I am a relationship type building teacher. I build relationships. I get to know my students up and down. But I have learned that I have to get to know my parents. The parents, I have worked so hard to build a relationship with my parents just as hard as it is with my students. And as parents, you have to do the same. We have to get to know each other. You have to call, check in. I have never called parents so much, but now I do. I send a talking points. I send messages. My parents have never called me. They called me all night, 8 o'clock at night. Hey, Miss Timmer, my student is doing Zern. I just got off work, what they supposed to do. And I'm like, oh, they're supposed to be do this. And we will stay up if it takes 30 minutes, an hour, stay up. And that is what it takes. And we have to do what it takes. And so speaking of what it takes, because I've been getting a lot of, oh, what are you doing? Or how do you do it? Or what is the magic? What is it? And what I can tell you is I have been doing the thing that I have done since I began teaching, which is teaching. I believe that every student deserves to learn. And because we are in distance learning, that the teaching doesn't stop. The way that I have teaching has changed, but not the teaching. As parents, the expectation should not change of what you expect. When I was in person, I had policies, procedures in place. My students know when, how to do things. We do, for example, slant. As a teacher, we're familiar with slant, right? It's a term. Slant, sit up, listen attentively, ask and answer questions, nod, track the speaker. That was really big in person. So we have to transfer that. We're going to slant virtually. We're not coming to class in bed. We're going to sit up. We're going to listen. You can nod on a computer. You can track me. I tell my students, lean in close so I can see. And so that's what it's about transfer and doing the same things we still discuss I teach first grade. I taught fourth grade for the past 3 years, and I switched to first grade this year through distance learning. And I was nervous, and I was like, "Oh, boss, they're not gonna use breakout rooms, or they're not gonna be able to use the chat or open up another screen." And I just was saying all the things that these first graders wouldn't know how to do. And boy, did they prove me wrong. Because they do open up a second screen and they chat and they use breakout rooms and they discuss. And some of them, I even have a student who's my co-host who lets students in, lets me know what, because I could get in a groove of teaching and don't know what's going on in the waiting room. And she lets them in. She lets me know, and first grader. And so as teachers, it's our job to continue to teach. And as parents, it's our job to continue to have those expectations. Building relationships, again, I'm going to talk about relationships. Anybody know, I love to get to know my students. I see them in Walmart, I used to, I see them everywhere, I see them at the movies. But the parent-teacher relationship, it used to be in person that it could be strong or it could not. Because the teacher, we did a lot of the heavy lifting in class. But in this space, the parent and the teacher, teamwork make the dream work. It has to be together. We have to be on the same page, because I'm not there to physically support your child. I'm supporting your child through you. I support my children through my parents. I love my parents. I give my parents awards, VIP, okay? MVP, most valuable parent. They love it. I have to acknowledge them, because you guys are the real MVPs through this space. I get on my parents, you are getting them up. You are getting them in a classroom. You are making sure they are prepared. My parents are calling me like what they're supposed to do, Miss Tillman. And so I want to stress to parents that if you didn't know your teacher, you should really get to know. And I know I never call my parents every week to check in. But in this space, if we want to make sure that we stay close from a distance, we have to call. I have to talk to parents every weekend. I send progress reports every week. I don't want to. I'd be tired. It's Thursday. I'm going to do a progress reports for 20 kids after this. Because we have to be very clear as parents, as teachers, about where our kids are at, because the learning still has to happen. Virtual changes.
Explain this the upcoming kickoff to me in a little bit more detail offline.
Another thing I want to speak on in my class, that high expectations. You don't have to be in person to have high expectations. We still can carry that over virtually. My students know they're still expected to do their independent work, just like you would have done your independent work in person. You're still expected to come prepared with your supplies. You're still expected to engage. It's no different. The high expectations, I hold high expectations for all of my students. I'm very, very empathetic, but not sympathetic of what I'm empathetic. I understand life happens, but there's still work that needs to be done. There's still learning that has to happen. And that's the type of teacher that I am. And that's what we should all expect. And then the last thing, one of the main things is creating supportive and engaging environment. That's much more easier to do in person, because you see them, you can give them a hug. But as a teacher and as a parent, how are we going to still engage and create that environment? What do we do? Again, you transfer some of the things that you did in person. How did you motivate students in person? You played games, you had challenges. I have a prize box. I pull up with the prize box from 6 feet. I drop my prize box, I go in my car, they pick, I Lysol down, I get my prize box and I put it back in my trunk. And my kids are excited because they know it's a chance I could pull up. We still have parties. I still engage my students in learning, and we still celebrate. And also we talk. Because I was telling my boss, like, boss, I don't think people are talking to their kids. And she's like, yeah, they are. I'm like, are you sure they're talking to their students? Maybe I'm talking a lot, because you got to talk to get your students engaged. That's virtual, that's in person. Talk to them. Even more, talk to them, talk to their parents too. Again, go back to the parent-teacher relationship. What's going on? Get to know what's going on. Don't assume anything, because we're in their house now too as teachers. We're in your house, parent. So we have to get to know who each other are. Me and my students, we have data talks. We talk about data. We talk about how they feel. We talk about what they ate. We talk about what they're going to do, what they did on the weekend. Get to know your students, parents, get to know your teachers. Know how you have to. My parents have gotten to know me really well. Some of my parents even called me like, Miss Tillman, I had to tell my daughter, I'm going to call Miss Tillman. You want me to call Miss Tillman? Or you better do your work. And they're like, no. So again, get to know your parents, engage with your teachers. Look, observe your student classroom. If the cameras are off, parents, you can speak up. Would you want to go in a classroom where everybody heads down? The teacher just teaching and students heads down and nobody's listening. It's the same thing with the cameras. We want a space that's engaging. We want to see students' faces. We want to see learning. We want to discuss. We want to utilize in breakout room. And I said that all to say, parents, this is what you should expect. Kids first. Parents, you should still expect learning through this virtual space. You want your kids growing. It's our job to teach, and it's your job to support. And again, it goes back to the triangle with the student at the top. And the triangle doesn't work if the parent or the teacher, if anyone fails, it's no longer a triangle, because the student is the one who will reap the consequences. And so I want you guys, again, there's many resources out there. We had an issue with a student whose parent worked all the time. I know some of you guys work. You know, we're working parents. I work. My daughter's at school somewhere else. And so it's and one of my students, a first grader, was having problems coming in and out of class. And so after having a meeting with the staff and students and my boss and our team, it was an issue of her getting in there. So my boss got her a super cool timer. It had it record multiple times. My boss, of course, she put her voice on there. You could put pictures. And when I tell you, my student, she's been in class ever since. It was a timer. It was her schedule. She was doing the work, but it was who was reminding her? Nobody was there. It's a $50 timer at Amazon, but it's worth it. We as parents, again, it's something parents and teachers, we got to support that student. And through distance learning, it's different needs it's more complex needs, but it's our job. Again, it's that triangle. We have to make it work. There's resources there's many programs that have been opened up for free that used to cost. RAS Kids, if your child goes to OUSD, clever.com is a great platform. It has many apps, great apps, level reading, math. My kids love it. And I just want to stress, in the beginning, in August, I was very afraid as a parent for my daughter and as a teacher. Like, what was we going to do? And so that my attendance may be, because Kitty likes to have 100% attendance, but I don't, but I have like 90 maybe today. And so it started from about maybe 40 or 50. And so to get to that 80 and 90% of my students coming in, to see 22 of my students screen on, face in, telling me what supplies they need and telling each other what to do. It wasn't me. It wasn't my students. It wasn't the parents. It was the triangle. It was all of us working hard. It was me calling the parents, and then the parent logging in, and then the student doing the extra work. We've been, me and the village. It takes a village. I know that's a very common saying, but it takes a village. And in distance learning, that village needs to step up even more again, so that we can make sure that the kids are learning. Because in the name of my boss, kids are first. Kids should always remain forefront and first. So we have to do, as parents and teachers and staff in a district and everyone, everything in our willpower. We teachers, our job, it never ends at 3. You know, it never ends at 3. But when we were in person, it might end at 5. But now through distance learning, it never ends. It's taking them calls all night, because we're giving students independent work. So that means we have to give them the opportunity to complete it all time. So that could be 8 o'clock at night. I'm available and extend myself all the time. And so again, teachers, this is a time for us to step up and do what we do best, which is teach and support students and get them to learn it. And parents, again, hold teachers accountable, hold staff accountable, hold the district accountable, hold yourself. It's on all of us. It's everyone's job to make sure that we are not using distance learning as an excuse to stop teaching and to stop having high expectations for our students. Parents, you still want your child learning. You still want a supportive and engaging environment. You still want high expectations, and we got to get to know each other. And I just want to end again. I'm a Clark Atlanta University alum, and our motto is find a way or make a way. And so we're going to leave that for everyone in here. Find a way or make a way so that our babies in our OUSD schools are learning through this time. No excuses, and let's make it happen together. So remember the triangle. I might patent that, okay? The student, the parent, and the teacher. Thank you so much. We will leave it open for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Tillman. Just before we get to your questions, I want to announce that one thing I didn't make very clear is that one of our goals in this meeting, in addition to bringing us all together for further action, is stopping permanent school closures, stopping permanent public school closures, and ending privatization as a racial justice issue. So we're going to have speakers on that, and we'll have questions here. Sylvia, could you announce again? It seems like something in chat. People need to know how to get the translation.
Can we do a quick Spanish interpretation, Norma, for folks?
Sylvia, can you tell people how to get this translation, the interpretation?
Sorry, Walter, but Sylvia's audio is locked to the Spanish channel, so she can't speak into this one.
I'm sorry.
If we have someone else who could.
Hi there, I could do it. Hola, mi nombre es Nancy, Hanna. Estoy diciendo
Sí,
que
hay
abajo,
un pequeño globo ahí al...
Sylvia is doing it, Zach.
Ok, gracias, lo siento.
Go ahead, Sylvia.
it wasn't Sylvia, it was Nancy. I could finish. Hay un botón abajo de la hoja que parece un globo, y ahí puede empujar y allí sale la interpretación que está buscando. Dice interpretación. Nomás busque abajo de la pantalla. Gracias.
Thank you. Eleanor.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes. If you turn off your video, you will not break up as readily.
Right, so my video is off, but I don't have any questions for Shalonda.
Eleanor, I'm happy to read a few questions that we have in the chat here. We had, a few great questions from some folks, so bear with us. So one question is, what resources do parents have if they have technical issues or issues connecting?
Well, we, in the beginning, I think it's Education Tech or Ed Connect, but there are a few programs that are giving out free hotspots, even some cable companies. We had to fix some of our students up with some hotspots. And then we also, OUSD, have given the students the computers. And then there should also be people at school. There should be a tech person who could assist and help with some of those issues. We've had to swap out computers, or again, there's Tech Exchange, yes, gave out hotspots to students in OUSD. Thanks.
Great. And just want to echo, there's a lot of appreciation and love that people are sending out to you for sharing all the great tips. And we have, I think, 2 other questions that we'll go through. One is, do you feel all your students have the needed tech access, have the computers and Wi-Fi access that they actually need?
I do. They did not at the beginning, in the beginning of the school year, but now they do. My students have tablets. Some of them have computers. Again, once the Tech Exchange gave computers and the OUSD, they delivered computers, my students definitely have the technology. Now, does some of them have internet connection issues? Yes. We witnessed some internet issues this morning, but that's why they use the chat. But as far as technology, I think they definitely have what they need. And then if not, there are supports to get the tech. So yes.
Great. Another last question, and I'm not sure if there's any questions in the chat in Spanish, but if anyone has a question in Spanish, you're welcome to unmute yourself. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, so the last question, and please feel free to always enter your questions in the chat and we can share them with Shalonda even after this event. The last question I think was around, have you asked your students or what your students think of education equality? If you've had conversations with your students around that, or any insight to offer.
Well, my first graders, we haven't talked much about education equality, but my students are thinkers, and we're going into Black History Month. So we've been learning about some people who have made some contributions. And so we haven't talked specifically about education equality, but my students do believe that everyone, deserves to be equal. We talked about Ruby Bridges. So they said that they are glad that Ruby Bridges went to school so that everyone can go to school together. So my students, I think they're for education equality, period. But I haven't talked to my little babies about it. Do I feel pressure?
Right. We keep getting a lot of great questions in the
Questions,
chat.
yeah.
I think we might have time for one more, and then we'll move on to the next part of the agenda. Another is, do you feel pressure to go into the classroom and provide in-person instruction?
I don't feel pressure, but I mean, again, I feel like it's about the safety of everyone. And so I feel like if it's safe, then it's fine. But if it's not safe, we just shouldn't go back. I don't feel any pressure. I feel like the pressure is just continuing to teach and continuing to like educate our babies. But as far as pressure to go back in person, no, I mean, I'm trusting that we wouldn't go back unless things are 100% safe and that we wouldn't rush things. And so again, it's about making it work under the conditions that we have now, which are virtually, and not being pressed and pressuring anyone to going back, because we want to be learning safely.
Thank you so much, Shalonda. Walter, I'll send it back to you. Thank you for all the resources you shared.
Thank you all so much, and thank everyone in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Eleanor is coordinating this discussion, but I see a chat here that somebody believes that Zoom translation is not available on Chromebooks, and that parents using Chromebooks should now join this meeting with the Zoom phone app instead. Could someone, Nancy or Hillary, translate that if that's in fact the case?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time? The translation's not available through Chromebooks?
That's what somebody posted in the chat, and that get out of the Chromebook and go to the Zoom phone app or something, if that's correct. But I just wanted to let people know that maybe there are people apparently trying to find and can't.
Okay.
You need to move quicker.
Disculpa, tal parece que por medio de la computadora Chromebooks que los estudiantes están usando, no está funcionando el servicio de interpretación, pero si ustedes marcan el número de teléfono y entran por medio de la llamada, sí va a funcionar el servicio de interpretación.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Eleanor, I'm sorry to keep
That's okay.
moving
Thanks,
in on
Walter.
anything. We need to move a little quicker. So we have speakers coming up, Eleanor. Now is the
I'm
time
ready.
for those speakers, Yoel, Kitty, and Charisse.
Yes, our next speaker is Dr. Kitty Kelly Epstein, Professor of Education at Holy Names University, longtime urban activist, author of several books, and host of a radio talk show. Dr. Epstein will discuss why closing schools does not save money. Dr. Epstein, you are on.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Shalonda, for everything you do. I hope people heard her say that she has 90% attendance, because that's one of the issues that comes up. Is it possible to even have the kids go to school? She does everything that's necessary to get the kids to school, and that's the kind of stuff we all need to do. And thank you, other people, everybody else, for your questions and stuff. There is some real good information in the chat, so you might want to check it out. There's one person put in a link for some tech materials from OUSD, and there's other stuff in the chat also. So thank you for all of that. I'm going to spend 5 minutes talking about 4 reasons why absolutely we can never accept the closure of schools any longer in Oakland. And the first reason is that this is a racial justice issue. The kids who are affected by school closures are Black and Latino and Indigenous kids. That's the agenda. those are the kids who are affected, not only in Oakland, but across the country. And when we see discriminatory impacts of police killings, we say that's a racial justice issue. When we see that the people who are being evicted are Black and Latino people, we say that's a racial justice issue. Well, that's what's happening with school closings. So it's clear, and it can't be acceptable. Second thing is that the argument that comes back is, well, maybe it's bad, maybe it's racial justice, but we can't afford to have the schools open, so we'll just have to suffer the consequences. But that's not real. It doesn't save any money. Even if you think it's okay to do something racially unjust, if it saves money, it doesn't save any money. So that's not an argument that can be accepted either. There's a mountain of evidence, and I've looked at the evidence on all of these points, and I'd be happy to provide the documentation to anybody who wants to see it. There's a mountain of evidence that not only does school closings not save money, in many cases, they actually cost extra money, because there's so much involved in closing a school in terms of moving students, changing the new buildings, new transportation schemes, losing school students who don't go to the district anymore because their school has been closed. In DC, there's evidence that they actually lost something like $40 million through their school closings. So number one, this is racially unjust. Number two, there's no excuse for it, even if you think money is more important than racial justice, because it doesn't save any money. Number three, what is the educational impact? Well, the fact is that smaller schools are better for students. Smaller schools are better for students. So if the argument is made that schools should be closed because the enrollment has gone down, that doesn't hold any water. First of all, we know there's a lot of reasons why enrollment goes down that has to do with purposeful gentrification and a lot of other things. But even if the enrollment goes down, that isn't a reason to close a school. Schools, more effective school systems in Europe, for example, often have schools, elementary schools that are about 250 students. Well, our overlords over the Oakland School District for the last couple of decades, the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team, which is the state's body that continues to tell us what to do, they want all the schools to be more than 500 kids. That's not good for kids. Large high schools aren't good for kids either. So the argument that we should close schools because of under-enrollment is not a real argument, because it doesn't provide educational quality. It actually decreases quality. The fourth point on this is the undemocratic nature of school closings. I want you to imagine that some overlord like the one I just described, walking around, driving around, making policy in Beverly Hills or Moraga or Brentwood, and deciding based on their capricious ideas about what are good schoolings, that they were going to close a school here on this block and this block over here. And we've decided that it'd be better for you if all the kids went to this one, or if we co-located a new school on your school property. I want you to imagine that happening in any white affluent community in the United States. It doesn't happen. It can't happen. It doesn't happen. It can't happen. And the fact that anyone would think that that is an appropriate way to decide on school existence in a community like Oakland is the height of irresponsible, racist behavior. It's not, no school that has been closed in Oakland did the school community decided they want the school closed. It's completely undemocratic. And so for all of those reasons, we can't allow these school closings to take place. It's horrible that we've had both officials and frankly, the community itself that's allowed this to happen, but it can't happen anymore. And in addition, because of the pandemic and because of the disruption that's already taken place, those school communities whose buildings are still available and who want to have their schools reopened should be able to make that happen. We are not going to be back to quote normal for a couple of years. even when we go back to in-person learning, we're still going to have masking, we're still going to have social distancing. There's going to be a lot of things that continue. And we don't have the space in the schools as they are now to do those appropriate health measures. So schools that have been closed where the buildings are available, if the school community wants that school reopened, that should happen. And we need to be ferocious about this. It's a total, complete racial, educational injustice to have this have happened to so many schools in Oakland. And it's the fault of the state, which started it when they took over the district, has continued it since, and other school board members who've allowed it also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kitty Kelly Epstein. Joel Velasquez is a hard-working, committed warrior for racial and educational justice. He is one of the co-founders of OPEN, the Oakland Public Education Network. Tonight, he will talk about racial justice in our schools. Please welcome Mr. Joel Velasquez.
Hi, everyone. I still see Kitty's presentation, which is fine with me, if we want to leave that up. And just want to make sure I have a mic check. Can everyone hear me clearly? Thumbs up.
You're coming through very clear.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
can take this presentation down if you like.
It's okay. So thank you for the intro. I appreciate that. Dr. Epstein and everyone that's here tonight to discuss this and hopefully move not just this discussion forward, but our actions here in Oakland around racial justice and educational justice. I am also a parent of 3 children, 2 proud graduates from Oakland Tech, and my 6th grade 12-year-old attends Edna Brewer, and she is an IEP student. I want to wish everybody a happy New Year's. I hope and pray that everyone's family is safe and healthy during this global pandemic and emergency. And I truly, truly hope that we all get through this together. I am a co-founder of OPEN, along with Mike Hutchison, Director Hutchison. I believe we'll be speaking later about that. And also a founding member of the Journey for Justice National Alliance that was created in 2013 when we were in DC with leaders from across the nation, which I'll talk about a little bit later. I've been asked to talk about not just racial justice, but also my experience in the beginning, my genesis around this. And I'm gonna try to do this in the 5-minute window without a presentation. So hopefully I can talk directly to not just all of you, but I'm hoping that some of this resonates and starts spreading throughout a community on some of our actions, where we are on the national scene around public education and how Oakland is one of the epicenters across the country around school closures, charters, and so forth. So I want to talk real briefly about Lakeview and how I got catapulted into this fight. And as everyone knows, in 2012, the same plan that they're trying to implement in 2019 and 20 was implemented in 2012, where they were trying to close a total of 25 to 30 schools. And one of my children's schools that we have been part of, that both of my children were attending, was on the chopping block. And I'm gonna save some of the details, but I wanna share a different perspective that sometimes I hear through the community, or even something that I wasn't aware of around some of the wins that catapulted kind of where we're at right now in today's state of OUSD. The 17-day sit-in at Lakeview highlighted what the district was doing per Dr. Epstein's quotes and presentation, that they weren't really saving money around closing schools. And we highlighted that, and we basically embarrassed them around those numbers that the OUSD was presenting. During our sit-in, that space became not just a platform, but kind of an epicenter around public education. And me meeting Director Hutchinson, along with many community members, that some of them are on this call, were connected immediately and kind of catapulted in the front of this fight at that time. And one thing that's really important to recognize is that not only did we stop them from closing the schools back then, and they're just now trying to continue that plan, but a lot of community members, teachers, parents, students became leaders from this fight that I see now today, including Director Hutchinson, but along with a lot of other people that are now and have continued to stay in this fight. Jump forward when we went to DC after Mike reached out to G2 Brown from Journey for Justice. We went to DC and testified and asking for a moratorium nationally around school closures, tied into what was happening then, where there was and still is a push for charters here in Oakland, but also across the country. And it's really, really important that I emphasize and hope that all of you, I am guilty of waiting till I was directly affected. When my neighborhood school, after 15 years of being in a neighborhood, was closed.
I think we lost Hillel for a second, and I will try to troubleshoot that on the back end. But in the meantime, Walter, I think we can try to move to the next speaker while Hillel tries to connect.
Okay, well.
Yes, I can move to the next speaker, Walter.
Go ahead.
Okay, so tonight's final speaker is Clarissa Doddard. She will speak on the reparations movement for Black and OUSD. Clarissa is a well-known community activist and advocate for mothers' rights. She ran for the Oakland School Board in 2018. Today, she is the executive director of Parent Voices, the Oakland East Bay chapter. Welcome, Ms. Clarissa Doddard.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me to speak about the reparations for Black students campaign. I just want to really appreciate the hosts. Thank you, Mr. Riley. Thank you, Ms. Kitty Epstein, and everybody that was involved in bringing together this incredible community. My heart just sung when I saw over 100 folks joining. This is really exciting, and I think that we are in a very important moment in education, and of course, across all issues in our community. So the Black reparations the reparations for Black students campaign is a project of the Justice for Oakland Schools Coalition, and is being steered by a small group of organizations, the Black Working Group, which is Parent Voices Oakland, Bay Area Parent Leadership Action Network, or Bay Plan, and Oakland Education Association, OEA. We have engaged in a 2-3 year process of talking with Black families specifically. And let me just back up really quickly. I have a son who is in the 7th grade at Bret Harte Middle School. I am a proud public school parent. I'm a proud union supporter. And I just want to say that this campaign it could not come soon enough. And, you know, I've been organizing parents specifically, starting with Black mothers, for 10 years now. I've been in the movement for 20, but I started with Parent Voices Oakland in 10 years. It'll be 10 years in December. And one of the first things that I was told as a new organizer coming in, I started out actually as a parent volunteer, and then I've worked my way into trial by fire into the executive director position. And one of the first things that I was told when I started was that I should focus on other communities other than Black parents. I was told, if you organize Black parents, you're going to essentially be wasting resources because Black parents don't show up. It's not a story that I tell as often at this point, but I think it's relevant in this moment, just in the sense that I have experienced this incredibly racist perception about Black families and how they engage in civic life, how we engage in civic life, the power that we're able to build. And we are watching a sea change in our country in this moment, right? About what's possible. And so I think it's really just important to mention that I started out being told that Black families, it's a waste to organize Black families. And now we're actually building a movement. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. I'll try to keep it to 5 minutes. So we went through a few years of engaging Black parents, youth. These were large meetings. Families were showing up, wanting to be heard. And not one family that we collectively engaged with and talked to hadn't been negatively impacted by our school district. This school district has historically impacted Black families, has historically pushed out Black young people, right? Has closed our schools. We've lost 18,000 students. The schools that were closed, 60%, our Black students made up 60% of the student body of those schools. We know that this is an issue. And so I'm really excited to be on this panel with folks talking about racial justice, talking about school closures. These are issues that need to stay visible. The campaign is going to has kicked off. I'm going to actually drop a toolkit and ways to get involved, because there isn't a whole bunch of time, and you can ask me specific questions about the policy and exact, specifics about what we're fighting for. But the campaign essentially builds a fund, right, to be able to support and center Black students, to provide, first of all, to stop the immediate threats of school closures, and some will say over-identification of special education students, but also ensuring that all students, no matter how we are classifying them, get the services that they need and are supported in all the ways that they need to be supported. That Black family engagement and leadership is supported, that we are supporting the professional development of Black educators and ensuring that we're cultivating a Black teacher and paraprofessional workforce that really serves our community, right? And having our families feel safe, having an environment, a culture that affirms Black identity. So those are some of the things that we feel would repair the harm that has been caused. And we really want to promote community schools that center Black students, because we know that all students will benefit, right? And building on the momentum of the George Floyd resolution, that Black organizing project was able to pass, and building on the incredible work at the city level, the comments are funny, building on the work at the city level of, the anti-police terror project, right, to move the Black New Deal and really talk about what it means to continue to build a movement of Black leadership, of Black well-being and Black health in Oakland, and education being a cornerstone of that and a foundation for that. Right now, the campaign has a primary goal in this moment to pass a resolution through the school board. We want to do that during Black History Month, right? That this month, ensuring that resolution is able to pass before the end of the month as a symbolic, not just a symbolic gesture, but a show of our power and the commitment of our district, right, to repair the harm and provide a vision for our school district, one that is rooted in true racial justice, not thin, hollow promises of equity, right, that are non-specific and ultimately look great on paper, but aren't materialized in the everyday lived experiences of Black families. And this campaign is rooted in organizing Black families, in building power, right, in our communities, and really providing a mechanism for us to grow this work of transforming our school district. The last thing that I'll say about this is, campaigns are not just one-offs, right? These are things that build, that bring us together, that build movements. We can't just elect leaders, right, and say, okay, go there, you take it, right? This isn't about the elected officials, even though I do want to give a special thank you and shout out to Board Director Van Cedric Williams and Mike Hutchinson, both community rooted leadership on our school board who, you know, I know Van Cedric is joining us this evening. We cannot just elect leaders and expect change to happen, right? We can't do one-off campaigns and expect change to happen. This is about, you know, building through collaboration, building through organizing one person by one person, brick by brick, a sustainable movement infrastructure that can win bigger, where we can envision brighter, bolder initiatives in the future. And I feel very strongly that this campaign is a place to get on the ground running, get into action, and build the kind of school district that Black families and Black children deserved and have been historically locked out of. And the last thing that I'll say is I'm going to put the toolkit in the chat. Please feel free to ask me questions. I'm happy to answer questions in the chat if that would be helpful for time, because I'm also running out of time.
Yes.
And again, this is about our students from preschool, right? My policy area is early education. This is about supporting our Black students from preschool right on through to college or career or whatever their aspirations are, right? And we cannot have Black teachers here if there is no housing, right? If Black families' basic needs are not met, right, our students aren't able to thrive in the ways that they deserve to. So this is really about building a movement that is cross-issue, that's addressing gentrification, that's addressing the food deserts, that's addressing all aspects of Black life and centering our Black children as our future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Clarissa. And we'll try to get in a couple of questions.
Now let's get Joel back. Can we get him? I think he's on. Can we do that, Eleanor?
Yes. Oh, hi, Joel. I'm glad you're back.
Thank you. My apologies. Of course, my only time I lose connection is during a presentation. So I'm going to just jump right back in and make it quick. I know we're running short on time. So where I left off was DC and instantly realizing that what was happening here in Oakland is happening across the nation. We were there with students from every diverse city in the United States and quickly realized that the exact same formula for charters moving in and colonizing our public education system was happening in every Black and Brown community and Indigenous community across the country. And this is over a decade, and that wasn't the beginning. I would say that was more of the middle. So I just want to bring Oakland to kind of this national stage that myself, along with Mike Hutchinson, with Mona Trevino, with Megan Bumpus, some of you may know that we've been in that national debate, in that national discussion around with Journey for Justice, and what that really means, and the relationship and the support that G2 and J4J and Black and Brown communities and leaders across the country giving and finding out what's going on here in Oakland, and us sharing our stories around elections and getting board members elected, around leadership, how to organize. As recently as February, right before COVID, Mike and I were in a national education seminar planning around what we can do on a national level with leaders from around the country on what we can do, not just to improve public education, but to create a different narrative around what we want, what we need, what we deserve, and what we can do. So I just want to finish off on a couple other pieces. You know, our current school elections and pushing back Bloomberg and Go Public Schools that have been running from the inside and outside of OUSD and creating policies to take advantage of Prop 39. And like Dr. Epstein said, and Clarissa mentioned, which was great context here, is that we can't continue to be distracted only by school closures. And I don't mean that in the context of that it's not happening or that it's not important, but is it a constant distraction on what we need to do. We are capable of creating, not just here in Oakland, one of the greatest public education systems, not just in the state, but in the country. Yes, there are accountability on our state level, along with funding, but we have to say something first. And this is the piece that I think is really important. And maybe a lot of people here haven't heard me specifically say this, but we have to talk about institutional racism. We have to talk about white supremacy. We have to talk about those things, because when Dr. Epstein mentioned it, this isn't about money. This is literally about money and privatizing our public education system and allowing charters to literally colonize and take our spaces. What wasn't mentioned earlier is that out of 19, I believe 19 or 18 schools that were closed in the last decade plus, most of those spaces have been filled by charter schools. So this isn't about just closing schools. If we just stop there, we're gonna fail. We need to start standing together, not just here in Oakland, but on a national level around what's happening around our public education system. There's no reason why we can't succeed and aim higher and not just stop around school closures, that we aim to the sky around what our public education system can look like. And we heard, which is not a new model, but talking about sustainable community schools, which is happening right now in Chicago. When G2 Brown did a hunger strike in a diet, they not only stopped the closure, but they got something over several $1 million to create a sustainable community school there, without getting into the details of that. So I'm gonna move on to a couple pieces. Back to our school board elections here now. We have to make our school board elected officials that are there now. Sam Davis, I'm gonna name names, Director Hutchinson, which we know is aligned with us and fighting for us, and then Cedric Williams. We got it. We cannot let our board members and our community members sit on the fence anymore. You're either pro public schools or not. Being complacent, not taking a side, not voicing that as a school board member is not acceptable anymore. And we as a community here in Oakland need to start pushing for that and make people stand now, not when votes are coming up, not at a meeting, but today. Ask that question to board members. Are you against the expansion of charter schools, whether that means new charter schools or under Prop 39, where they're taking our spaces right now as we speak? So that's not over, they're tied together. And I just want to wrap up on a couple of things, and then I'll let everyone.
Joel, thank you. Thank you so much for lifting up like the action that we can take. I do want us to move on, so I'll give you like another 30 seconds.
Sure.
Your comments, and we can move on to the town hall. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And I know we're short on time, so my apologies. So I just want to park it there. We have to hold our current board members accountable and not wait to be reactive. Together, instead of working in silos here in Oakland and across the country, because it's not specific here, if we stand together, we can accomplish anything. If we're not trying to create the best educational system here in Oakland and in this state, then we're missing the mark. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for allowing this space and this conversation to continue. And I hope that everyone continues to stay involved in this fight. Thank you.
And they're saying that
Thank you. Whoever that is, please mute. Please mute. Now, Eleanor, we were going to take some questions, but we need to move very quickly because we are behind time at this point. Do we have some questions?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Walter. I have one question here for Dr. Kitty Kelly Epstein. My family is reeling from the closure of my son's amazing public small school last year. Can you please comment on the long-term emotional impact of school closures?
Yes, there's a lot of research and evidence about this also. It has a very harmful effect on children to be disrupted in that kind of way. They have relationships with families, with teachers and friends, and to be grabbed out of a school and put in a different school, or feel that the the relationships and the situation they were in has been snatched away from them is very harmful. It's one of those traumatizing experiences. Some of us remember having to change schools because we moved. You know, some of us had to move sometime during school life, and that was horrible. At least it was horrible for me. But at least I understood that my family was moving to a different house. It wasn't that somebody had decided my school didn't matter enough to keep it open, even though the building was still there and everybody in the school wanted it to be open. And that's even more devastating. So no, it's very harmful for kids. And there's a lot of research on that also. Again, you know, happy to provide some of the research if people want it, but I think it's pretty clear.
Thank you. And there's one more here for you, Dr. Epstein, which asks to tie in our current portfolio model in OUSD and any new local or state legislation that could affect school closures or charter expansion.
So to put this in a very general way, there have been a number of actions taken by the school boards that I think need to go. They just need, we kind of need to start over. And certainly when it comes to the democratic possibility of running our own schools and running them in a racial justice manner. And when the state interferes in a variety of ways, either through their legislation or their appointed trustees and FICMAT managers, we need to reject them. We need to fight that also. And I think that's something that's gotten lost in the last few years. But I think the model for schooling needs to be community-based schools. And a lot of the things that have come out as policies in the last few years, I think, need to be rejected and undone. You know, I'm not totally a Biden fan, but, you know, one of the things I like is he just tossed out a whole bunch of policies just as soon as he got there. And I'd like to see some of that.
Thank you. And there's one more here that I'll toss out to whoever would like to take it. Is there a national network around sharing ideas or experiences of community schools?
Well, I think that what Joel brought up about Journey for Justice is a really good network. Excuse me, Joel, go ahead.
No worries. Yeah, I want to speak directly to that just real quick. Yeah, I mean, Mike was on a call this afternoon. I wasn't able to make it with them, and another call tomorrow. And the short answer to that is yes. We want to bring that into Oakland if the community is something that they, you know, obviously want and need, and find funding for that. And we need school board members to support that. J4J's been working for that nationally. I can send some links to some videos around where that's happening in Chicago as we speak. There's 20 sustainable community schools that are being funded in Chicago as we speak. So it's happening. We'd like to see that. And we hope that's the direction that public education heads nationally, not just in Oakland or in Chicago.
Okay, very good. Do we have time for one more, Walter?
We're 18 minutes past the time that we said we wanted to go. I'm going to suggest that we move on if we can, unless you have a burning question here. That seems like an area where we haven't discussed at all.
No, I think we're good.
Otherwise, we want to be sure we get the second half of our town hall in, and want people to remember to, one, check out the raffle that will be announced at the end of this hour, and also be prepared to take part in a further meeting. We're going to have other school board members here. We can only have 3 at a time because of the Brown Act. So at our next meeting, and we're going to do another meeting and plan another meeting, and hope that everyone will be here, and we'll have some of the technical aspects of it better organized because of experience. Right now, we're going to just move right into this section with the school board members present. There are supposedly 3 school board members here. I see that Mike is here. I saw Van Cedric earlier. Sam Davis did say that he would be maybe a little bit late, but it's already late. Maybe he'll be here.
I'm here, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Sam. Good. So each of the people here will be asking questions of the school board members, and our process is that a person will ask a question, take 2 minutes to ask the question, and maybe motivate the question to some extent, but 2 minutes, and let's try and hold to that. And then each of the board members will have 3 minutes to answer the question, and then we'll go to the next question. So we'll have 3 people asking questions. If that's misunderstood, I'll pull your coattail. And let's try and stick to it because our timing is getting past us. Starting with the first question, we're going to have Stacy, who is a member of Oakland Not for Sale and has been working around school issues for some time here. Ask a question for every board member present.
Hello, good evening to our board members. I just want to say I'm Tracy. I'm a proud East Oakland native. I have 2 children who've had the unfortunate experience of going through a school closure recently as a result of the Blueprint for Quality Schools in Oakland Unified School District. And I just want to say that school closures are traumatizing for children and their families. It's one of the worst pains as a parent to watch your child's beloved school community be ripped apart, torn to shreds, and voted out of existence on the basis of a lie that this is going to save the district money. It's wrong. Closing schools don't save money. We know that now. And it's a shame that the schools that are being targeted for closures, mergers, and co-locations are schools that are predominantly serving children of color. Closing our traditional public schools is a racial justice issue. As our new school board members, we just have some questions as parents who've lived through this nightmare of school closures. Will you oppose new school closures when they are presented to you at the board meetings? How do you see yourself working with other school board members to ensure that future school closures are stopped? And also, if the community surrounding the schools that have been closed recently that are vacant and may be available to charter schools in the future, if those communities would like to see their schools reopened and turned back into a traditional public school, are you also open to that? Thank you. Oh, we can start with, let's start with Sam Davis.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. Yeah, I mean, I've heard loud and clear. It's been a super painful process, and I think in my district we saw what happened with Sankofa. That it's really under enrolled right now, and so I'm definitely committed to making sure that Sankofa stays open and is preserved and is supported through this process because they've really gone through a lot. I asked the superintendent, I really think we need to have a postmortem on what happened with the cohorts 1 and 2 so that we're just, really clear on it, because it's clear that it was very expensive, that, it's clear definitely in case of Sankofa that a lot of families left the district. Kaiser Sankofa, and it's definitely been said about other schools as well that I've had experience with. So we really need to understand better what happened with cohorts 1 and 2 before we even start discussing anything further. I'm definitely opposed to school closures. At the same time, the district is really struggling for enrollment right now, and so that's why we do have a policy about enrollment stabilization, trying to bring people back into the district, trying to create more separation between us and the charters in terms of the enrollment process, and to the degree that we can try and get charters to come back into the district and reintegrate back into the Oakland Unified, I think that will help us to address these enrollment issues so we're have a more sustainable enrollment for the future. And I'm not sure I understood the third part of the question.
It was basically if the community surrounding some of these schools that were recently closed, if the community decided that they really wanted to fight to have their schools reopened, because some of these schools that were closed recently, within the past year are sitting vacant. And, when they're vacant, they can, they're available to charter schools. And, that's what we're trying, we need to stop this issue with school closures. This is one of the things that we were talking about. It's not like we're having one less school, it's just being converted into a charter school, and that's an issue. So if the community surrounding the schools wanted to have their schools reopened, would you be open to that idea of reopening these closed schools so they won't be converted into charters?
I mean, the challenge is right now, we have such limited resources for education in California. And so I think it's about building a movement to fight for more resources for education, because I would love to reopen all of those schools. But we also have a movement for reparations for Black students. And we also want to create community schools. And the sad thing is that California just doesn't fund education at the rate that it should. And it's very challenging to do all the things that we want to do. And so it pains me to say it to you because I see the hurt on your face. But it's just trying to be honest about what can we do in Oakland Unified and what do we not have the resources to do. And I'm all for, let's get out of 1000 Broadway. Let's make cuts at the top. We have to do all of these things. But it's a really challenging moment for our schools because we're, trying to get out of this pandemic. We're trying to get more funding for our schools, and it's not an easy situation.
Move to the next board member. Van Cedric.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you very much for having me, inviting me to the town hall this evening. My name is Van Cedric Williams. I am District Director 3. And when we talk about school closures, I ran my campaign on OEA's platform of no more school closures. So I will stand by that. I know that school closures over the last 20 years, about 16 or 18 of them have been in the most marginalized and vulnerable communities. And so it is something where we do have to stand up. And my community in D3 is probably #1 on the list. We have the least amount of students of each district enrolled in schools in D3. Over 50% of the students go to schools outside of D3. And